Blast off.
Welcome back to our second half hour tonight on Cambridge Inside Out. I'm still Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
So we were just talking during our 3-minute interlude here, since we had been talking about presidential election politics, about voting machines.
Yes.
And one of the things that I feel some obligation to point out is I was on this technical working committee for the computerization of the Cambridge elections back in the 1990s.
Right, because we used to do it on paper.
We used to do, what we did was a combination. We did municipal elections where you actually wrote the 1, 2, 3, 4 on your ballot. But there were quite a few elections which were tabulated over in a place on Cambridge Street, a Harvard building, which were actually done with punch cards. You may remember those ones? You did a little poker and you held it up to the light and you wondered whether, in fact, you actually voted the way you thought you voted.
Right.
Which we all saw played out in Florida in 2000.
The chats.
But the thing is that when we were on that committee and we were actually making the decisions, or I should say we were making the recommendations to the Election Commission about voting machines.
Okay.
And what would you want in a voting machine? So we tried out things like they were actually optical scan, optical character recognition type ballot readers.
Is that where you'd fill in the bubble and it goes? Isn't that what we have?
Well, ones where you could actually write 1, 2, 3, and it would mostly interpret that. Which we said we don't like that.
Okay, right.
And one of the things I think those of us who served on that committee feel pretty proud about, and were horrified in the year 2000 with the presidential election. Is that we absolutely were insisted on an auditable paper trail. And what that meant was even if the worst case scenario went wrong with the voting machines, that you would still have the paper ballots.
Backup.
The ballots themselves still exist, even if what you're tabulating is the electronic record that's derived from it through the scanner. Right? You still have the ballots themselves as an auditable paper trail. And we were absolutely insistent on this. And so we chose these AccuVote scanners, which have the ballots themselves, and that's what we've used since 1996.
For all elections or just our local?
We had to choose these to be good for all elections, including the municipal election, which was a bit tricky because the AccuVote scanners themselves do not tabulate PR elections. They don't deal with ranked choice voting. And there was a certain amount of engineering that actually had to go involved to have the scanners actually record ballot records. So you had to record every voter's ranked choices. Right.
Now, who did that? Did they offer to come up with that fix, or did?
I think that was actually written into the firmware when they put the chip that recognizes the ballots. So every time we have a municipal election, it will read that. So it's really, I was talking to the head of the Election Commission the other day about it. Basically, the way you understand Cambridge elections, as opposed to other ones, is that there's the scanner.
Right.
And then the scanner just basically produces some sort of raw data. There's a translation process where it gets turned into a record that's human readable, in fact. And for the municipal elections, by the way, for the other ones, the scanner does it all. If you just tally total number of votes for candidate A, total for B, that's all done right on board. But for the municipal elections, it's really 3 parts. You produce a sort of raw thing on what is a really ancient 128 kilobyte memory card, which is, we actually overflowed them in one election where there was a ballot question, which zeroes them out, and then they had to rescan all the ballots. It was really not the greatest, but it's worked. I mean, it was only that one incident, really, and it's worked, and we've had recounts that have completely verified that our election worked very well.
That's good.
But the thing is that the election equipment dates now, it's over 20 years old, and though you may say, well, it doesn't get used that often, so maybe it will wear out. But truth is that back then we had 44 machines, 42 precincts. We now have 33 precincts, and spare parts from various of these machines have been used to replace broken stuff. So it's we're at the point now we really should, if we don't get new voting hardware this year, we should get it soon.
But it won't be for this election then?
It could potentially be.
Really? They could
I think they're talking about it possibly being a budget item. The question, and the thing is that the stuff that you would just get pretty much off the shelf would be perfectly fine for things like a presidential election.
Yeah, but it's not going to work for the municipal.
Not necessarily yet for the municipal. So part of the thing you have to make a decision about is to make sure that whatever hardware you're purchasing will also be usable, maybe with a little programming so that it can also be used in municipal elections. Fortunately, in the 21 years or 20 years since, there have been a number of locations around the country that have adopted ranked choice voting of one form or another.
So it exists. There's a market.
Yeah, so some of the new voting machines that are out there are more and more making available, they are actually capable of managing ranked choice ballots. They're not, on the other hand, they're not capable, most of them, of taking in 25 choices in an election. So, but they might be.
Which we did have. Did we have that on the ballot
We
this
had
year?
25, and now 23 or 24, now 22.
There's no dropping out, unfortunately.
Right. Honestly, it wouldn't matter if we had fewer choices. There is the provision in the 1938 law that governs the Cambridge elections does explicitly state that the Election Commission can limit the number of choices to no fewer than 15. So as long as the machines could handle 15 choices, it would be just fine. Now, some of the elected officials might say, well, that's terrible, you're removing choice. I can assert with absolute confidence, I'm like the data guy, that in fact, if you restricted the choices to 15 or 12 or 11, it would have zero effect on the outcomes of the election. You might have a few ballots in, but it's not going to change. The likelihood that it changes winners or losers is essentially nil.
That's true.
So you could do that, but it would be a change in the tradition, and people don't like to change traditions. So, if you had 50 candidates, there's some who would argue that you should be allowed to vote for all 50. I don't agree with that, but there's some who certainly feel that way. So anyway, I thought that was at least worth mentioning.
Who's deciding that? Are you on that committee?
No, but the thing is I still kind of hang around as a bit of a. I mean, they ask me, and I give my advice, and on this. So I'm trying to make sure that all the questions that need to be asked are being asked before any decisions or even requests for proposals that are going to be actionable really go out. But I actually went to one of the dog and pony shows by the vendor who supplied new machines for the city of Somerville. And they're actually more capable. They're actually pretty. One feature is that actually they can capture actual images of ballots because they have so much more memory in them.
So they can, when we scan them, doesn't it capture the ballot?
It doesn't capture an image of the ballot. It just captures it reads it and interprets it.
I think you definitely want an image.
Well, you could do it now. And the moment I heard that, I said to myself, wow, that would really make recounts a whole lot different. Because then you could just compare the image there with the actual paper ballot. You could do the matching.
I thought that was the way it was done. I think they definitely should do something like that.
So anyway, this is something that may be coming this year, or maybe done by next year. I'm certainly going to be on the job making sure that it's completely compatible with the municipal elections and that there should be no problems about this. And I'll make sure that there are a lot of other people who are wiser than I am are going to be involved in that.
So do you want to go back to the bike stuff? Or
No, not so much. You talked briefly about cycling safety. And I'll say
this thing about April 29th, though?
I'll say that because it is related to that. This is sort of, I think of it as kind of I think of it more of somebody referred to it as a pop-up cycle track during public comment.
He was the public hearing,
all right. So there's an order that basically is saying that on, I think every month they do walk ride day at the end, last Friday of the month.
That's right.
I've gone on some of these things. You get like a free bell and a candy bar or a water bottle or something like that. Nice thing to encourage cycling as a good transportation alternative. So the proposal here is that on April 29th, to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the first walk ride day, that they want to take Memorial Drive all day and remove one travel lane or restrict it on both sides.
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, it's a very nice sentiment. Obviously, we do close Memorial Drive and open it to cyclists and pedestrians only on Sundays during the summer months. So it's not like the road is absolutely essential all days of the year.
That's Sundays, not Fridays.
But that's right. It's Friday. Imagine Friday rush hour. You know, it would be nice if there were plenty of alternatives, but the parkways, the MDC, we used to call them MDC, now DCR parkways, unfortunately do become important arterial connections to major roads like the Mass Pike, Route 2.
Route 2 and the biggies, real
let's face it, Fresh Pond Parkway is
totally
pretty clogged during rush hours, and all that traffic is connecting to the river roads, as they say.
Right.
So to me, it's like a nice sentiment, but honestly, I will be shocked if the DCR actually says okay to this.
So, and they're the ones, not
they're the
Cambridge,
ones.
right?
It's a DCR road.
They run that.
The City of Cambridge has no authority to say how things should operate on it. So nice sentiment.
I would never go on a bike on Memorial Drive.
Yeah, I mean, if you make it impossible, think about it. There are during busy hours, there is the lane that's going through.
Right.
And then there's the lane that's backed up because they're waiting to take the left turn onto the Mass Pike. If you take away one lane,
forget it.
Forget it. Essentially,
it's crazy.
So it's nice wishful thinking, but I think it's an absolutely nutty idea.
Okay.
All right.
What about the?
So there's just to sort of trot through maybe a few things that happened at City Council. Either did or didn't happen at City Council. It went on. It was a long meeting. Yeah. We've actually been blessed with some nice short meetings, but this was
is this typical? So you're a City Council watcher, and I'm not. I tried to watch it, and it was 10:30.
I would say it's atypical, partly because half the agenda was supposed to happen on February 8th.
Good point. So it was almost like two meetings.
Yeah.
And the public comment was very long. Because of
the medical marijuana.
The medical marijuana.
Really, it's funny. I often, when I look at the agenda when it first comes out on a Thursday night before Monday meeting, and I always say, well, these are the things that are the significant pieces, whatever. Right. And then you actually go to the meeting, and then the crowd of people who shows up for something that you thought of was sort of a done deal.
They definitely dominated.
Right. So from this particular case, might as well speak of it now.
Yeah. Why don't you give some history?
There was Milford Medicinals was a medical marijuana dispensary party that wanted to open up a facility around Ellery and Mass Ave.
On Mass Ave, right?
On Mass Ave. Which is a little strange because the city went through a long process to determine two districts where this would be permissible use. Okay. One was in the East Cambridge North Point area, one was in the Alewife area.
Okay, not in the middle of
Right. Now, I'm not saying that was perfect or anything, but the thing is there was a deliberative process, went through planning board and settled on these are District 1 and District 2. So now, Milford or whatever it is, Medicinals comes here and then they want to do that. Now, so they put in a proposal, it sort of just stalled. So they've now asked to have it withdrawn, but they've changed their name to Sage Cannabis Incorporated.
Same group, okay.
Same people. And now they said, no, we want to open up on Mass Ave by Ellery Street. And I said,
but how can they do that if the planning board already said you have to be one or the other?
That's why it's a zoning petition.
I see.
They want to change the zoning to
So this is a petition. All right.
Right. Now, one of the representatives, a person I know, actually wants to come on the show.
Who is that?
We'll talk about that.
Did they testify that? I mean, did they give public comment?
He was there. There.
All right.
But the public comment was kind of interesting. I mean, some of it was sort of heartfelt. People.
Personal, because these people.
Very personal. Right. I think there was one guy who looked like the guy on the zigzag rolling papers from California.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, right. Okay, sure.
I know.
You
gotta
get your medicine there, buddy. Right. But anyway, all humor aside, that was really the dominant aspect of the public comment were the people who were there for that, which is kind of funny because there was no vote happening. All it was a simple referral to the Ordinance Committee and Planning Board, which is totally routine. It happens.
Yeah, but they wanted to make sure that someone heard what they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is so people made it out as though there was a big hearing there. People were showing up at City Hall saying, is this where the hearing on medical marijuana is?
So that's why there's so many people. They thought it was a hearing.
They thought it was something other than just a referral. Okay. So anyway, that turned out to be the dominant issue at the meeting, and then they eventually got to things that were actually on the agenda. Now, you actually saw some of it on the television. I was there for a good while, at least till 9 or
Really?
10 o'clock.
Where were you sitting? Because I was looking at the camera and I couldn't see
I was
you.
actually...
You were
I
to
was
the
act-
side?
No, actually, I was sitting over in the Ackerman room for a while. We had a big projection TV chatting
Okay.
with
Because
some
there are only
friends.
like 1 or 2 people in the audience.
You know,
Yeah.
listen, I go to City Hall on
Yeah.
Monday nights partly to
Yeah.
go to the City Council, but also just to
Yeah.
catch up with people because it's
Sure.
kind of a meeting
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
You know, it's like Monday go to meeting, you know.
Right.
instead
Well,
of
I'm
Sunday
glad
go to
it's on
meeting.
TV. It wasn't for about
Yeah.
half an hour, but
So they were getting into a thing about the Volpe Transportation Center in the
Yes.
petition, and I actually
Yeah.
found what their debate on the floor of the council kind of interesting. So that's when I went in.
I see.
And then I was like, right in the back, I was like making signals to the council, going, "No, that's a good idea, good idea." I was like that, that nutty guy in the back saying, "Do this, do that."
All right.
They weren't paying any attention to me, I don't think.
And the
But-
Volpe,
Well, the thing is, what happened is that
That got
the
confusing.
Volpe, there was a zoning petition. I guess it was really a city council petition or a planning
it
board
was going to
petition.
expire, right?
No, that actually has expired, and
Oh,
now
that's
it's a
right,
matter
February
of
9th,
so
okay.
they're going to the question is, do you want to reintroduce it? So Dennis Carlone had an order, calling
Yeah.
for refiling of the
Yeah.
Volpe petition to get the process started again,
Right.
which to me makes total sense.
Yeah.
Though there was some people in public comment there
Yeah.
saying, no, you shouldn't do that. You should
Right.
stall this forever.
Right.
But the truth is that the General Service Administration, who's sort of determining the disposition of the property and in the process of getting a developer, they already have shortlisted their list of potential developers. They will be putting out requests for proposals, and they may actually have a developer on board within a couple months, certainly by summer,
Yeah,
before
but there was
summer.
some question, how can you have a developer when you have no clear plan?
Well, the thing is
But-
there exists zoning. It's just that it's not desirable zoning right now. So
Right.
you could design based on that. You
But
could
does
also.
the developer do what he wants, or does he have to be beholden to whatever comes up?
Well, I mean, the thing is insofar as the
That's what I said,
reconstruction of a Volpe building itself, it's
Yeah.
federal and it's thoroughly
Right.
exempt from all zoning.
Okay.
The real issue is about the
Would it be
non-Volpe.
housing?
It's the
Right.
Volpe site, but
Right.
it's the
What's gonna be there?
non-Volpe
Is it gonna
uses.
be
So
retail,
should it be open?
housing?
How much?
Right.
What fraction of open space? How
Right.
much housing? How much
Right.
commercial? How much office? How much
Okay.
whatever? Lab
So what
space.
developer would want to actually latch
Oh,
onto that?
there are people
Really?
bidding on it. I mean, Boston Properties. I don't know who the shortlist is, but they're the developers for much of Kendall Square, and there obviously is a lot of demand for the space there. So if they could get their hands
Interesting.
on,
And I
some-
guess they know how Cambridge can be, so they're
Right.
willing to jump into that, right?
Historically, Boston
Hmm.
Properties, when they became the primary developer for
Yeah.
Kendall Square, they were taking a risk. So that's a company historically which was willing to take a
Yeah, but
risk.
there's not a whole lot of affordable housing in Kendall
No,
Square.
honestly, many of us feel that the Volpe site should house quite a few people.
Right, because
that should be a
they're-
big part of what they do. But this is the hardest zoning pickle I've ever seen, in that there are so many constraints. The federal,
Yeah.
the federal government says we need this. You got to build us a building, and then you
Right.
got to pay for it out of the proceeds from the
Right.
rest.
Right.
There are people who are saying we need to have more housing, and then there are
Right.
others who are saying we want to have a lot of open space. And by the time you've actually try and meet all the constraints, you run into the very real possibility that it's not possible
To do to
all
please
that.
Right.
So then it becomes difficult. I've said on this program before, I think if there was ever time for Dennis Carlone as a urban design guy who
Right.
actually was deeply involved
Right.
in projects in East Cambridge
Yeah.
already in the past,
Yeah.
for him to step up to the plate
Yeah.
and be the magician
Yeah.
who finds something that's maximally
I think
acceptable
he's
to
willing
most
to do
people.
that.
I think he may be. There's the fact that he was the one who was introducing this and
Yeah, I
calling
was
for the
kind of
refiling.
encouraged by his
I thought it was great.
Actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so this will he can really make his name if he
Good.
can somehow turn this into something
Sure.
good for everybody.
Good.
But the thing that was interesting, there are some people who didn't want it to actually start the zoning clock going.
Right.
So they actually did something that I don't think the city clerk didn't seem to think
It
it
seemed
had
to be a
ever
lot. I
happened.
was trying to watch that. Well, can you do this? Can you do that? Yeah.
Right. So here's the thing: is that so the order called for the refiling. So the thing is you
Right.
can pass the order, which then refiles the zoning petition.
But there was
right?
an issue. Do we have to have a public hearing? Do you have to- yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So what they did was they actually changed the wording so that they're not refiling the petition. They're essentially, the order now is calling for referring the matter and the order itself to the committee, right? So that they'll take up the issue, and then what will grow out of that will then be within a few weeks, presumably, will be then doing a refiling in maybe a modified form. So normally the ordinance committee doesn't do this. They just say, here's a petition, start having hearings on it, click, 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 and eventually things either expire, get ordained, amended, or whatever. As it was being proposed to do it this way, I was sitting in the side room going, that's a great idea. I mean,
Wasn't there some pushback a little by, I forget who, saying, oh, we have to have all this meetings again about this? Or,
well, Tim Toomey did, but, and I love Tim. I love Tim Toomey to death, but the truth is that in some respects, he's sort of making a good show for his strong constituencies in East Cambridge, saying, I'm going to fight the good battle. But ultimately, this is something that, whether they come up with a plan or not, they can't just ignore it. The GSA is moving forward. They are going to have developers there. You do need to have some zoning in place, and it'll be an embarrassment if the city just says no mas, we're not going to do a thing here, right? So they're going to have to come up with something. Even if they come up with something that the developer says that we hate this, they still have to come up with something, right? And they need to have something in place. So anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting part of the process, and so apparently they are moving forward to some degree. One thing that happened when I went home, apparently, they've had one bit of a proposed ordinance, but on the in the queue since last year, actually for at least maybe a whole year, was from animal rights activists that wanted to ban exotic. I forget exactly what the wording of it is, but they wanted to ban exotic animals in traveling circuses and blah blah blah. Which now, the truth is, the Ringling Brothers, which is really what, as far as Cambridge is concerned, it's the parading of the elephants here. That's it. Right? But they've already announced that they were phasing that out, so within a year, it's just not going to be around. So
why even bother?
So honestly, it's sort of formality at this point anyway. But I did find it, I found it kind of funny, somehow how art imitates life, imitates art, that we won't put this up on the computer, but I read Zippy the Pinhead this morning in the comics, and it was entitled Three Ring Circuits. And the opening line in Zippy the Pinhead, the morning after Cambridge passes, this is, circuses are retiring all their elephants, not good for their brand, huh? And anyway, the rest of it, so I thought, well, isn't that good timing?
Yeah, that is funny, Oh, right, because the elephant Republican.
Pretty funny, exactly, right. So anyway, interesting. Now, another matter that was, I wasn't there, so maybe you heard some of the discussion about it, but it was certainly a topic of public comment, was the fact that Central Square has lost several festivals.
So was that part of public comment? Because I didn't hear that part.
But there was also an order, which was...
I saw the order, but I didn't know someone had commented.
So the order was referred to some committee. I presume it was the Neighborhood Long-Term Planning Arts Celebration and blah, blah, blah committee, the committee that has, that's got a name that is this long, right?
Is it, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, the thing is, on the Volpe one, I thought to myself, we have a committee it's now been a joint committee called Neighborhood and Long-Term Planning that essentially is not in any way involved in neighborhood and long-term planning.
Interesting.
You'd think if we're going to actually have a discussion about like planning and planning principles, that
they would be
something called the Neighborhood and Long-Term Planning Committee should be
call
involved.
Them up,
Sorry, just referred to the Ordinance Committee.
Okay.
So maybe they need to revise the names. They did, by the way, pass the rules changes, or at least I think for rules changes you may have to lay it on the table. I'm not sure, but so now the committees are redefined. They've been officially appointed. They can have started having regular meetings and what have you.
Okay. But that whole thing about who makes those decisions, because Mark McGovern said, I don't remember this coming by me. So.
The thing is, the Jazz Festival was pretty much privately organized, but nothing happens in the absence of cooperation.
That's small,
Larry Ward was one of the major people. It was somewhat small, but it's gotten bigger. And they wanted actually to have it even bigger, so that I believe they're moving it to Danahy Park for this summer.
All right.
Which sounds...
Well, there is a Central Square Festival, which is not that old. It's not like that.
We used to have the Central Square World's Fair,
That's not the Caribbean Festival.
The Caribbean Festival is privately organized.
Okay, so the Central Square World's Fair is different.
Right. To speak quite frankly, the Caribbean Festival is a bit of a nightmare.
But
it's
don't
spectacular.
They have that now every year, or am I thinking?
It ended in shootings down in Kendall Square this year, and it always ends in problems.
Because it's a lot of people that aren't from Cambridge.
Right. Exactly. So we have that, but the thing is that we lost simultaneously the Jazz Festival, and the the Cambridge River Festival, which of course started out at the river.
But wait a minute, I went to a jazz festival over in University Park this summer.
Well,
what was wrong with that?
It was great, but the thing is they want to move it to Danny Park. I thought it was wonderful here.
I don't know why, because they have more room actually along. They closed that part in front of Forest,
Yeah, I know. I think it would have been fine here, but
I don't know how they're going to fit all the vendors. They have vendors and stuff.
Well, yeah, there may be some pressure from some quarters within the city administration for them to move. I don't know why they'd want to move them. I thought
that was very well organized and nice stage. And
if it was up to me, I would put the Cambridge River Festival back along Memorial Drive on the river.
But that was because of construction, and now I don't know what the
construction, I believe, is maybe up at the Lars Anderson is still happening.
But at the other end,
right.
by Lars Anderson.
But the Arts Council, which is really the one who has to decide about the River Festival location. So point a finger at them for making decisions.
So they're the ones who make these decisions.
A few years ago, we heard they were going to move. They were going to do it in Central Square for a year, but then it was 2. And then they were going to move it around the city. The latest I'm hearing is they're moving it to Kendall Square. The Cambridge River Festival.
No, I think Kendall is the worst place to have anything.
But they're going to move it there.
Why not Danny Park?
No river. They have to change the name.
Well, there was.
They can change it to the Cambridge Former Dump Festival.
All right.
Right? I don't think that would sell.
Former Dump Festival.
But anyway, there's a lot of pushback now from the Central Square Business Association, who would like to retain some of these and at least get some say in how are these decisions being made.
So what's the bottom line on this?
So they referred this to one of the committees, and there'll be further discussion, and presumably. If we maybe one day we'll get back to Central Square World's Fair, but
I'll put in my 2 cents. I'll write to them about acquiring vendors to do all these other things.
All right. Anyway, we're out of time.
All right. Till next March 1st, primary day.
See you next week, and don't forget to vote.
Right.